recognize the ranking member, Mr. Cummings.
Mr. Green, where do we go from here? I mean, really, I mean, it's...
I think, unfortunately, where we go is we need to see the dollars and the time that it's going to take to do design excellence. We don't have that. We're comparing apples and oranges. I'm not so concerned, personally, with the appearance of embassies. The state IG did a report in 2008, and the key findings were essentially that people were happy with the appearance, and the host countries of those 12 embassies that they looked at were happy with the appearance. So that's not what I'm worried about. What I am worried about, and I think what DS is worried about from a security standpoint, is can you actually produce these things in the same amount of time, with the same security, at the same cost? And until we know that, and I don't know how you get to it before you do some of them, but I think the chairman raised an issue. What is cost per desk? What is cost per desk under standard embassy design? We have some good figures on that, I'm sure. What is cost per desk under design excellence? Until we can compare apples and apples, I think there's going to continue to be a lot of skepticism that you can do this as fast and as cheap.
Mr. Minister, I've listened carefully, and I am concerned, and I think we all should be concerned when we don't get documents. And it becomes very frustrating. Time is valuable. And, I listened to Admiral Mullen and Ambassador Pickering when they talked about the report, the R&B report. And, it was some of the most, I think it was Ambassador Pickering that said, I asked him why did he agree to get on that board? And he talked about the fact that, the review board, that he felt that he owed it to his country and to those who died and their families to make things better so it didn't happen to anybody else. And some kind of way, I mean, when I listen to you, Mr. Green, it makes sense that if I've got something that's already designed, and I mean, I've got something that I'm working with, and I guess you've had years to make any adjustments that you see, right? I mean, is that right? In other words, it's like you got this house, you use the same, pretty much the same materials, same structure over and over again, and then, but in the meantime, if there were problems, you can make those adjustments. Or, and just correct me if I'm wrong, I'm trying to put this in simple language for the American people. Or if you want to, if you're in a country where there's some unique situations where you need a different kind of door, you may have some height requirement or whatever, but still using the basic same model. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
So logic tells me that if I'm using the same model, then it's just logic that it would be quicker if I then go to another country and use that model. That's basically what you're saying, right?
That's the logic that makes sense.
And so I think for the State Department, Mr. Minister, it becomes a difficult argument to sell not only to us, but to the American people. Because the American people, they don't know everything that you know. So you've got, it's easy for us to, and I can understand because it's your expertise, is what you all do, but sometimes you have to break this stuff down so that people get what you're talking about, because to them, it makes no sense. And I'm not saying, I'm saying with limited knowledge, it makes no sense. With all of your information, it probably makes a lot of sense. And so we find ourselves in a situation where you've got what Mr. Green's saying, we've got what you're saying, but the bottom line is, going back to what Mr. Green has said, if he had the data to show that we could get the same security costs and time, all those factors pretty much the same, that he would sign on the dotted line. Am I right?
That's correct.
So why can't we get the information? There seems to be some reluctance, and I don't know why that is. Can you help us with that? Because, see, one of the things that happens here, and I've lived long enough and seen enough and been up here long enough, we can get distracted from the mission by getting caught up in a lot of, and I'm not saying we don't have to deal with those issues, but it doesn't allow us to do what we're supposed to be doing, and that is providing security. So we've got, oh, why didn't I get this report? Or what? I mean, they're legitimate questions. They really are. But at the same time, that's the time that we could be taking our energy and focusing on making sure that our folks are safe, because that's what the American people want. So go ahead.
I think that's absolutely right, and I'd be happy to explain in more detail why it is that if we award 100% design on the date of award, the period of performance is shorter, and we could have people into safer facilities faster. What it means is that if we know that our appropriation is fixed, we know which buildings we're doing, it might take us longer to do the design. We're going to be looking closely at the requirements. What are the materials that are going to work in that environment? How do we put that building together in that environment? But from the date of award, when we award that project, it's not going to include any design time. It will be no longer than it would be with a design-build standard embassy design, and it will likely be shorter. I could go into more detail. We could provide the
There's one little thing that, whoa, rewind. There's one little thing that bothers me, and that is why. In other words, if I've got my model, if it's working, I know what it's going to cost, I know how much time it's going to take. Am I missing something that then I have to go to something else okay, oh, let me run and do something else when I've already got this, I've got it, finally. You follow me?
Yes. I think it's a fair question, and what I've tried to lay out is that the standard embassy design was a fixed solution based on an average hypothetical size embassy or consulate. We build embassies and consulates in every environment, whether that's because it's very hot, whether it's because it's very cold, whether because some systems are going to work there on the seafront and other systems are not going to work in a completely different environment. We're looking at the real requirements of missions and thinking about how do we build the best buildings for those missions. The standard embassy design was a good fixed solution, but it also required us to build freestanding warehouses, regardless of the location. There are some places we don't need a warehouse. Why build a warehouse if we could get...
Then you take it off. Am I right? Is it right? I mean, you take it off. If I don't need a garage, if I got a house with a garage and I suddenly don't need a garage, I take the garage off. And by the way, it's not just one design, right? There are several designs, right? Just one? Okay.
There's one standard embassy design.
So you just take the garage off.
All of those things taken together, and if I could try to sort of put or describe the Excellence Initiative in a nutshell, it's really to say that we are taking those lessons learned from the standard embassy design. We're taking those modular pieces of it, but we're providing a lot more flexibility in how those could be put together in a way that's meaningful. Again, you build a very large embassy, having these 2 bars is not efficient. You're cladding 2 buildings as opposed to 1. You're securing 2 separate buildings almost as opposed to 1. So I think that using architects, engineers, folks within the department, our security professionals, we look at each case and come up with the best and the most efficient solution. In many ways, what the Excellence Initiative is doing is exactly what you're suggesting, right? It's taking sort of a baseline and modifying that baseline in a way that is sensible for the mission. Right now, the standard embassy design or the standard embassy design that we're moving forward from was a very fixed solution. Again, very horizontal, 10 acres, warehouse. That's not always the best solution in all the environments. And I'd like to also state that the cost per desk, we use that cost per desk to develop our budget. So we have a cost estimating office in our bureau. When we build a budget, whether it's a standard embassy design budget or an Excellence Initiative project, they tell us, you know what you've spent historically for this many desks and this many people in this environment? This much. That's what your budget is. We're going to work to that same budget under the Excellence Initiative or under the standard embassy design.
Ms. Menendez, let me tell you something. You helped me. What you just explained, now I'm finally getting, so in other words, what I thought you were going to say is that circumstances change, that we have new technology. I thought that's what I was going to hear you say, that new technology, better use of certain, in other words, better materials, all those kind of things might go into, and I don't know anything about buildings, so, but all those things might go into changing the box. And what you're saying is that you may help me if I'm wrong. You may look at the box, but you're forever changing the box. Not that you don't look at it, you don't take it into consideration, but it may be changed substantially. Is that, or are you talking about just a brand new box?
I would say that it depends. So again, if we're looking at a very large mission, to have the standard embassy design and to put that in place would simply not be efficient. London is a good example in the case that not only are we building a cube, which is much more efficient than sort of 2 separate boxes that go up, which would require twice as much cladding, but we're also using materials that make the building significantly lighter, that reduce the size, the weight, and the expense of the foundation that needs to be put down. The curtain wall reduces the weight, which also influences the foundation, and it's all able to go up faster than a traditional concrete building would have been able to go up in that place. So I think it's both materials and base building in certain cases.
Last question. Do you anticipate being able to take, say, a box? London is, I know, very unique, but that perhaps the creation of another box or something that you can use in more than one place. You follow what I'm saying? As you're developing, and how does that play into that? You follow me?
Yes, I think I do.
In other words, if you build an embassy, you do all the things that you just said. Okay, now we've got great design, we've got security, this is the best buck. We get the best bang for our buck. Time, everything is straight. Do you anticipate being able to use, say, for example, that model, a model like that somewhere else? You follow me?
Yes. Let me use an example which may be too common, but I think it sort of demonstrates the point. There was a time when most people who drove had a Model T. It was a great car. It was a simple car. As we evolved, cars got better and better. They evolved, and they also sort of separated it out into the different types of cars. So today, rather than going with a Model T, you could go with a version that is much more secure, much more safe, But you could also choose to have an Austin Mini in one case, and you could go with an SUV. But those things depend on where you are. One, you want to be in a small urban environment, you're a small mission, you could go with a smaller size and still meet all your requirements and be more efficient to run. But there are those other times when you're going to need the larger solution, you're going to need the SUV. And I think that being able to put the appropriate solution with the mission and to consider those things and to make sure that we're appropriately spending the money that the taxpayer gives us and considering not just first costs but long-term costs, I think that's what we're talking about doing.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you all for being here.
Recognize the chairman of the committee, Mr. Issa.
Thank you. And for the Chairman Chaffetz and Ranking Member Cummings, I appreciate your questioning. And fortunately, I came back in just in time to have you talk about automobiles. And I agree that sometimes I actually don't think the Fiat 500 or the Morris Mini is ever appropriate from a safety standpoint for our men and women in the State Department. But having said that, I certainly understand the difference of size and scale and some of the urban versus rural considerations. But, Mr. Green, those considerations really aren't what we're asking about today. What we're asking about is, do you, to the greatest extent possible, use a mass production concept, which is what standard build is. It's about, do you build a one-of-a-kind formula race car that's beautiful and fast and has unique characteristics, and each one is different? As a matter of fact, the secrets aren't even shared between formula racers. Or do you build a Toyota Camry in order to get a Ford Focus or a Ford 500? Do you build a mass-produced, consistent, reliable, understood, bugs worked out, repeatable product so that you get a highly reliable product that can be maintained throughout the system, standard windows, standard other characteristics if possible, in order to get a good product at a better price? And I switched to Ford quickly when I realized it is about Henry Ford's model of greater value for less cost. Isn't it, Mr. Green?
Yes, it is. And I think it's like standard embassy design might be the Chevrolet Suburban, but when necessary, it becomes the Escalade.
And there are options to further up armor and so on.
Yeah.
Ms. Munoz, one of the other questions, Inman is all about security, right? The so-called Inman designs.
I'm not as familiar with the Inman designs as that program was over long before I came in.
Well, let me tell you what I was told 14 years ago when I came in and started going to embassies as a member of Foreign Affairs. We didn't used to think of embassies in the same security sense we do now. And what we discovered, the Beirut barracks and the Marine barracks and the Beirut embassy bombing and others taught us, was there is no substitute for setback. Do you understand that as the person making these decisions?
Yes, absolutely.
So when you talk about urban versus rural and location, and I was just in Britain, where setback is highly compromised, and they're compliant, but they made a 5-acre decision and went vertical and did the best they could, including the famous moat, part of, and in fact, some crash considerations. Those safety considerations, any time you give up setback, you have to trade off higher cost for that setback, don't you?
You do, but we are not suggesting under this program to ever trade setback.
Okay, so when you talk about a large footprint, which you did, and small footprint, the truth is that standard build, and I'll go back to Mr. Green for part of this, is about starting off with a footprint sufficient for current and future embassy considerations, including possible add-ons, in a country so that we can make a 50-year decision on sovereign U.S. soil, isn't it?
Yes.
Mr. Green? Correct. I was on this CODEL, and I apologize, I was able to take a Democratic staffer, but none of my counterparts were able to attend because it was short notice. But I was struck by something that I want to make sure is in the record today. And what was talked about earlier in Papua New Guinea, changing characteristics. When they were talking about, and they flew in people from your offices to be there where we were in London, they started talking about, well, you know, it's individual and we have to work it out. And I suddenly realized what you're doing is you're custom building more and more. You're going into a rut, which is instead of saying, State Department will plan, including excess space if appropriate, we will plan for the anticipated 50-year necessary facility, and we want to make sure that it's very much understood. Instead, what they were talking about, well, is one group might need a little more here, and somebody may, which suddenly hit me, what you're talking about is you're talking to the current, according to what I was told, you're talking to the current people in an embassy, the current ambassador, the current staff, in order to find out what they want as part of this design characteristic. And that is one of the things that I came back profoundly concerned about from the trip to London. It wasn't the London facility, because at 500,000 square feet, there's a lot of room. But when you're looking at embassies and starting to ask, well, should it be plus or minus based on unique current characteristics, aren't you inherently creating that downstream problem that you're designing based on what an ambassador and their staff want, not based on a plan that looks 50 years in the future? And I'd like each of you answer that to the extent you can.
I think it's a great question because it really addresses one of the enduring challenges of the Department. We're trying to build buildings for 50, 100 years, and things change over that time period. I think that where we can financially and based on the urban environment or the environment where we're building, we do try to buy larger sites, and we actually make a deliberate effort, and this was not always done with the standard embassy design. We site the building in such a way that we know where a later annex will go. For years, maybe forever, it'll be a lawn, but we know in advance how we might use that space so that it gives us that flexibility. The other thing that we've done under the Excellence Initiative, and I think this is something that is meaningful and reduces costs in the long term. So we're looking at things like using raised floors, using demountable partitions, making sure that infrastructure is sized in a way that within a given envelope you could have a significant increase in staff with very little cost. That wasn't true with the older model. Again, I think the standard embassy design taught us a lot, but I think we can improve on it. We can improve on it in meaningful ways that give us more flexibility for the long term. And I think—
Right. And Mr. Green, as you respond to that question, I just want you to include from your research, from your committee's activities, in fact, isn't that what standard build is supposed to do, is to include that? So isn't it mend it, don't end it, rather than saying standard build didn't include future annexes and expansion in their consideration?
No, it's a continuously moving standard that is done. Let me just respond to your earlier question, though. And you know, what do we need 50 years out? You know, the ambassador wants a bigger latrine in his office, or we want 50 consular windows instead of 5. That changes all the time. I mean, we saw it here today. It changed with Papua New Guinea. You had a plan to do something, and all of a sudden the department says, nope, we need more for whatever reason. There's right-sizing that goes on constantly within the department. There's the much publicized, but I'm not sure how much it's occurring, the pivot to Asia. What does that mean for those embassies in Asia? More people. Well, you know, 5 years from now, it might be a pivot somewhere else. I don't know that we're ever going to reach the perfect solution to say that we can build something that's good today and it'll be good even 10 years from now.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I think the point that your research and what we're hearing today is all about is that as you standardize and drive down the cost per square foot, the ability to build that few extra square feet and the flexibility is inherent in it. As you drive up the square foot cost, you inherently are building smaller and tighter. And tight sizing is not what we need for flexibility. It's right sizing with a plan to expand or to add in. And hopefully as you continue your research and we get the numbers, we'll begin seeing how standard build can be made to do just that. And I thank you for your indulgence and yield back.
Thank the Chairman. We'll now recognize a very patient member from Michigan, Mr. Bentivolio, for 2 minutes. No, I'm just teasing. 5 minutes.
5 minutes, good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. During our last conversation, I forgot to ask you a very, very important question when it came time, when we were discussing London. And you clarified that it's not going to cost $1 billion, it's going to cost about $800 million. And you don't look at how many employees it's going to house, you call them desks. Is that correct? Okay, so how many desks in the London embassy? How many?
I'm sorry, I believe 644.
644. So what does that work out to? Let's see, 800 million divided by, how many did you say?
644 desks.
That works out to be, what, $1 million a desk?
Some of our costs can be very high, including for
$1 million a desk? You're going to, okay. But I understand the risk in London and the cost per square, well, is it meters, per meters? What's that cost? Do you know the breakdown? How much it costs per meter or per square foot? I know here in America we look at the square foot cost.
Right. For London, I don't have the square foot cost at the top of my head.
Okay.
I would like to add for London, though, for those members who
I think you
may not
already
be
said
aware.
that you're selling property to cover the cost of the $800 million embassy, correct?
Yes.
You did say that, okay.
Yes. And
so you're in these old buildings now, am I correct?
Yes, these are old existing buildings at the embassy.
And if it runs over the London building, takes longer than expected, what's it going to cost to house our employees in the older buildings per month?
We're not expecting that to happen.
You're not expecting, have you, seriously, for the life of me, and I'm sure there probably has been one or two government contracts that didn't go over budget and didn't go over, or came in on schedule. But, okay, so let's just ask you this. How many work orders or change orders are pending or are in process in the London embassy new construction? Change orders do delay a project, don't they? Or do you add that to the, it's a change, it's going to take longer, so we'll just move the schedule, completion date out?
As you might imagine, with over 200 projects in construction, I don't have the number of change orders in London. But what I would like to make clear is that while delays pose, like on any project, a certain amount of risk, the Department made the decision in 2006, many years before I was there, under a different administration, that this was the best value for the taxpayer. And I think it was a great decision. We, for $50 million more, are getting a brand new embassy that meets all of the security standards in exchange for property that we had been in for years.
So you're going to meet all the security standards in London?
Yes.
Versus not in Phnom Penh or some of these other countries that, well, seem to be, look to me, maybe in the future, greater threat. And let's talk about that threat. We had, a while back, we had some Secretary of State people tell us they don't do a risk analysis when it comes to risks in the country that they're housed, thus Benghazi. They didn't really read what was happening, and a lot of our Americans were killed. So do you do a risk analysis every day and what the dangers are outside of the embassy, no matter what country you're in? But wait a minute, I'm sorry, I just answered my own question. You don't do that, do you? What you do, apparently, is in places like London, you take every risk imaginable and come up with a building that's worth $800 million at a cost of $1 million per desk. I can't really, I'm just thinking about the soldiers in Iraq. We looked at the risk out there, and if we thought the risk was greater, and by the way, they shot rockets at us once a week, we put these concrete barriers in front of us, sandbags, and we'd adjust. And I'm sure because of curb appeal, we can do those things a little nicer, a little fancier, and take every single building, including a modular or cookie cutter design, and add to that building outside to address any risk that, well, if you actually looked at the risks outside of your embassies and addressed them, you could take proper precautions. But I will say, and I know my time's running out, Mr. Chairman, but you have always had, at every embassy in the world, the best security system you could possibly buy. It's called the United States Marine. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Now going to recognize myself in consultation with Mr. Cummings here. Just a couple quick things, and then we will, I promise, we will end. I do have a question about London. London is unique. Beijing was unique. There are some iconic properties. There are some amazing relationships, security needs. That's understood. There's been a suggestion that you're still on time in London and on budget in London. What is your current assessment of where we're at in London in terms of budget and time?
That's exactly my assessment, that we're on budget and on schedule.
What about the VAT issue? Where are we at with the VAT issue?
I'd like to keep that conversation limited because our conversations with our counterparts in Britain are sensitive, but I would like to say that we're making good progress, and we're comfortable that we're within the budget on VAT.
And I appreciate that. I see that as a potential threat. They have I believe it's a 20% VAT, which could obviously be a huge and major issue, and something we would appreciate if you keep us apprised of. I had an opportunity to visit Dubai, which was one of the last standard embassy designs. What do you find wrong with the facility in Dubai?
I don't know that particular facility, so I wouldn't be able to address it. But I would like to say that there are many standard embassy designs that I think work well for their missions. I think there are some that could work better, and I think this initiative is about improving on something that was good and that did a lot of good. So I could look at Dubai more closely and get back to you with comments, but I don't have any particular, not knowing it in great detail.
The general concern here is it just doesn't make common sense to me. It's just not common sense to suggest that we're going to spend more time on design and ultimately that's going to take a shorter period of time. I still, and we'll follow up, we've been talking for hours here, but as a follow-up, this is just conceptually, I just don't understand it. There have been some suggestions that standard embassy design was just one size fits all. That's not true. That's never been true. We built nearly 90 different buildings. And one of the things that drives me personally, and I've shared this with Mr. Cummings and others, one of the things that drives me on this is you have multiple GAO reports and an Inspector General report that says, my goodness, standard embassy designs, they're going faster and they're generally coming in under budget. We never get reports like that. And yet I look at the State Department and they say, but we're going to totally scrap that. We're going a different design, different way, and we're going to focus on architecture because architecture is diplomacy. You can shake your head no, but that's the video that the State Department put out. That is the video that put out. You're shaking your head.
Because as I explained, we are committed to being on those same budgets. We're committed to that schedule. We're committed to meeting all the security requirements. I just know that we can build even better buildings, right? What we're doing is what we should be doing, what bureaucrats should be doing. We are trying to improve on a good product. As you rightly pointed out, the standard embassy design did require modifications for different. We're taking that a step further and making sure that it is not a fixed envelope, that it takes all of the lessons learned from that and allows us to modify our buildings in a way that's smart for the mission, smart for the taxpayer, and smart for the long term.
And And I really challenge those assumptions. It will play itself out. I don't believe they'll be faster. I think we have strong evidence that it's taking longer. I think the consequence is it will cost more. And I think the other consequence is we're going to have more people in harm's way. If you brought the people from Papua New Guinea here and lined them up and had them raise their hand and say, which design would you like? They just want to be safe. They just want to be safe and secure. And it's going to be the most opulent and extravagant building in that country under the standard embassy design. And those modifications could have been there. I appreciate the dialogue. This is the general concern. You said it in response to Mr. Cummings. The design portion will take longer. Again, the consequence, I think, will be more people in harm's way. It will take longer. It will be more expensive, and we'll have ongoing security concerns. I really do appreciate your participation here. I have no doubt about the sincerity of wanting to come in under budget and on time. I just don't think you can get from here to there. And I find very few people that agree that you can get there. That's why we need the documents. That's why we're going to continue to push the Inspector General and the GAO to continue to look at this. It's why we're going to continue to have some hearings on this. So I do appreciate all your participation here. I know you care deeply about your country and the work that you do, and you're passionate about that. We want people that are passionate about that. But we also have an obligation to have this back and forth. That's what the Oversight Committee is all about. It's what the Congress is all about. It's part of the process that makes this country unique and better and the greatest country on the face of the planet. So I thank you again for your participation. We look forward to getting the documents from the State Department sooner rather than later. And this committee stands adjourned.